do something? Because I feel like we're going to tip over right here. Happy 2023. I feel like we should have like flying cars by now, don't you? Remember when you were a kid and you thought forward into like year 2000s or whatever? It's 2023 and we still don't have flying cars. Anyways, happy that you could join us. Hopefully you didn't stay up too long. I don't think I've stayed up till 12 for New Year's for a while. But I don't know about you. I am well rested. We are going to continue to take a look at 1 Corinthians. Today we have allotted for us 1 Corinthians chapter 3 from verse 9 to verse 17. As usual, we'll have that projected for you. But if you do have your Bibles, go ahead and find your place. Paul is still talking about and trying to teach and correct the church in Corinth regarding unity, their lack of unity, and he's trying to promote unity. Remember, since the beginning of the letter, he stated that he heard that certain facets and portions of the church, they were trying to divide themselves into groupings of those who follow Paul, Apollos, so on and so forth. So here within the first 3 chapters, this is kind of where he is hammering down still on this particular topic. Obviously, he found this of great importance, or else he would not have taken so much time. So if it's important for Paul, it is important for all of us. Let me go ahead and read, and you can follow along. Again, 1 Corinthians chapter 3 from verse 9 to verse 17. For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, you are God's building, according to the grace of God which was given to me as a wise master builder. I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it, but let each one take heed, now he builds on it. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work becomes clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss. But he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. So, going back to the previous verses, which I think it was a couple of weeks ago that we covered that, Paul was utilizing an analogy. He was utilizing the illustration of a farm worker, somebody who works the field. Again, just focusing on this idea of keeping the church united, and there's no need for you to name drop, no need for you to say, I follow this leader, I follow that leader, no, I prefer this guy over that other guy. Paul basically illustrated this idea of the church being a plantation of sorts, and he said, look, I planted a little seed, somebody else comes and waters it, and somebody else does something else, but God is the one that makes it grow. So that was the illustration. But on verse 9, he rather abruptly changes illustrations, and now he is not focusing on explaining this phenomenon from an agricultural perspective, from a farming perspective, but he is utilizing the illustration of a building, of building up a structure. Similar ideas, but again, different illustrations. And on verse 9, he starts out by saying, "For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field. You are God's building." Again, this change of illustrations. And then he goes on to say, "according to the grace of God." Let's stop right there in the middle of chapter 10. Paul describes himself and everyone else that is part of this building project as God's fellow workers. Now, this is a pretty big deal. It is a term that if you sift through Scripture, specifically Paul's writings, he has utilized this terminology before, applied to his fellow workers, such as Titus, Timothy, so people who work alongside of him. But here now he is applying it to God. And he's saying, we who are part of this building project, we who are part of this building, we are actually fellow workers with God. Which again, not too shabby. If you were to build a resume and you wanted to build it up with fluff and make yourself more impressive, you would probably, put something like this: I am a fellow worker with God. I remember when I was in college, not for theology, not seminary school, when I was in school for sociology, towards the end of it, I had to figure out how to fill my resume because I needed a job thereafter, teaching and whatnot. And it's pretty common where you're at school and you have no experience whatsoever, so you need to, again, just make yourself a little bit more marketable. So you find, things to do, usually non-paid. So in my situation, it was being an aide, finding a class that I could teach, fill in for the professor. And I remember this one particular time when this doctor, don't remember his name, never met him in person actually, he needed some research done. He actually just needed to check on certain dates. And in my days, in my time, the internet was there, so it existed, but we had something called microfilm. Now, microfilm was basically when newspapers still printed out periodicals, there was a need to maintain or keep a record of those tangible things, right? Because you read it and you throw it away. So what they would do was they would take a picture, rather literal picture of that page of the paper and put it on film. And then you'd have a literal reel of film that you would put into this machine that looked like an old school tube TV. And then you go through the reel and see and find, that page in that newspaper that you needed to know what happened. And that's how it worked. Universities, they purchased these microfilms and they archived it. So they were, the ones that had that property, and it was hard copy. There are probably multiple copies, but not many. It's not like the internet where you can just Google something. You literally had to physically be there at that particular library to look for that particular newspaper and what happened in that particular day in that particular page of the newspaper. So again, it's pretty analog process. Long story short, he needed to know a specific date. And I got a hold of that information. I'm not sure how. And I say, well, this would be a good resume filler. So I went to my library and looked up, the archives, and I found the date and whatever he was looking for. And it literally took me like a half hour. Not much work whatsoever. And then I emailed him, again, internet existed, and I gave him the information, and he was so pleased, he was so happy, because he needed that information for a conference that he was presenting this research paper on. The title is very impressive. I have no idea what it was about, but I'm sure, it was somewhat impressive. And then, after the fact, he emailed me back with a copy of the research paper, and right on the cover, there was his name, the title of the work, and then right below it, my name as a co-researcher. I was like, man, like a co-writer researcher. I worked alongside of him to build this research project. I wasn't there in person because I had better things to do, but again, co-workers. How impressive. And you bet you I put that thing right there in my resume, and all the fluff and all the fillers and all the ways that I could make myself look a little bit more presentable to potential people that would hire me, so on and so forth. But in actuality, as I've explained, I didn't do much. It wasn't that hard. He really, if he lived in another time, he would not have needed me. Again, just Google that information. But I was considered a coworker. And Paul here, now going back to the text, he mentions this. And at first, it seems like very impressive. Wow, there's this building project, and it's God's building, and we are co-workers with God. How impressive. But then he follows that up by saying, what does he say? For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, you are God's buildings, according to the grace. Which basically means it's not really that impressive. You really don't deserve much, if anything. You really didn't do anything that was really essential or important. You were kind of there, and God chose you to work with him, but not because he needed you, just because, again, you were probably benefited a lot more than he was, for sure. Imagine putting that in your resume. Wouldn't really work, right? So this is kind of the idea. Fellow workers, working alongside of God by the grace. Just purely grace. Not because he needs you, but because he wants you to be a part of this, because it is beneficial for you, much more so, if anything, than he would be benefited by that. He goes on, which was given to me as a wise master builder. I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. Again, very similar to the illustration of the field worker, the farmer. One plants the little seed, the other one maybe cultivates the soil, the other one, waters it, so on and so forth. Different parts to this project. Paul here, he states that he was the one that laid the foundation. Back in Acts chapter 18, we see the story of the foundation of the Corinthian church being laid. It was the foundation of the gospel of Christ. In that particular region of the world, Paul went, spent some time there, met some people, and laid the foundation of the church found in the city of Corinth. But then he acknowledges the fact that, look, the foundation is laid, and then other people come, and then they build on top of that foundation, because that's kind of the point. But funny things about foundations, it's that when you analyze a foundation, let's say, for example, you save up a couple $100,000s, right, to build a house. And you hire people to do different portions of that building project. And obviously you start from the bottom, right? You wouldn't start, hiring a roofer. So you hire someone to lay the foundation, groundwork, right? Just to prepare the base of that building project. And then you go there every once in a while to check on the work. And then you ask the guy, hey, how's the foundation work going? And he's like, no, it's okay. What do you mean it's okay? Because again, foundations, it's pretty black or white. It's either good and solid or it's not. You don't want to hear, it's pretty good. Could be better, but no. This is pretty important. The foundation needs to be laid perfectly. It needs to be strong. It needs to withstand nature and anything that happens. It's either good or not good. It's either appropriate or not appropriate. Again, black or white, right or wrong, true or false. And in that sense, it applies perfectly to his analogy, because any building who claims to be the church of God, who is not built upon the true gospel of God, is not the church of God. It can be called many things, but ultimately, if it does not have that foundation, it cannot be called that. God does not accept it as such. But again, Paul laid the foundation. And then he mentions other people went ahead and they did the work on top of that foundation. Let me read to you verse 11. Actually, I'll start from verse 10 again. According to the grace of God, which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation and another builds on it, but let each one take heed how he builds on it. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work, what sort it is. Let's work a little bit more with the parameters of this new illustration. Again, Paul very abruptly on verse 9, he changed illustrations on us. Now we're talking about a building. He has established the fact that he was the one who laid the true foundation, and there's only one foundation, the foundation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which again, as the master builder, he is the one that laid. But other people now are building on top of that foundation. And based on the details, and again, the parameters of this illustration, as stated, the foundation is either good or no good. Nothing in between, no gray. However, things that are built upon that true foundation, those things can be qualified as so-so, unfortunately. So you could have things built on that foundation which are legitimately part of the building that are not built in accordance to God's ideals. So people, might cut corners here and there, use less than great materials because it is inside the walls. No one knows how the wiring is done, so on and so forth. And that can happen. Paul, he is basically stating here, that can happen. However, and here is the catch. Even though people come, and different people, right? They built on this foundation. And again, there may be a gradient of quality of work. Everyone involved in this building project, in this building, is good, is part of the building project. They're a part of the church, regardless. Imagine this, mind-boggling, regardless of the quality of work. And this is important for us to get this straight, for us to get this, be very clear about this. The foundation needs to be perfect. The foundation, it's either right or wrong. However, other things that are built upon that foundation, there might be a gradient of quality. And sometimes, hopefully not often, but sometimes, when you get a worker who does somewhat of a shoddy job, or a job that is not quite perfect, guess what? If he was built on the right foundation, he's still part of the building project. Because his status, his position, his identity is not based upon his work, but it's based upon the foundation. And the opposite, or the inverse of that, is also true. Think of a building. built on a less than perfect foundation. A foundation that is not laid upon the truth of Jesus Christ. Whatever is built upon that can be the greatest work ever. You can have the facade of the Taj Mahal built upon that foundation. It looks great, ornate, beautiful, grand. People from all over the world come to visit, try to take pictures of it, be a part of it. It will not last. It cannot be called the true church of Christ. Doesn't matter how fancy you make it, how much you work upon it. If the foundation is not laid correctly, whatever is built on top of that will not last. So you have these distinct ideas. So Paul is saying here, look, those of you who build on top of this foundation that was laid perfectly because it was laid based on the truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ, be careful. Be careful because your work will be evaluated. And here he mentions gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw. 3 verses 3. And here it's just basically a dichotomy, a list of worthy and unworthy materials. Now, depending on how you utilize these materials, again, you may not notice what you built that wall from, because it might be layered and covered by other things, decorative stuff. The only way that you will notice what it was built from, what materials you use, is when the fire comes. When the fire comes, it burns it all. And once everything is burnt, you see things are exposed. Things that are left over, things that remain. Wow, that was good material. That was precious stone. That was gold. That was just things of substance. The hay, the wood, the straw, that's all consumed. And now you know, maybe that contractor wasn't that good of a builder. Maybe they did not spend the right amount of time. Maybe they did not use the appropriate materials. Maybe they cut corners. Now you know, because now it is exposed. But again, there's that catch. What is the catch? Verse 14. If anyone's work which he has built on and endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. What does that mean? This fire, this consuming fire that Paul is alluding to, has nothing to do with one's salvation. What is salvation based upon? Foundation. That's it. So that person who unfortunately was part of the building project, legitimately saved, when the fire comes and exposes the type of work that they did, if it is something that was less than ideal or desirable, things that were unworthy of God's standards, he's still part of the foundation, still part of this legitimate building. However, when the rewards come, he or she will not receive them in comparison to those who worked diligently in an appropriate way, in a manner that was worthy of the owner of the building, the one, the architect, the one that had the plans since the beginning of time. Those people who were part of the building project, that after the fire, it is made clear how diligent they were in that building project. they will be rewarded. This is what Paul is talking about. Paul here, he is not talking about the difference between saved or unsaved. Everyone is in this category is saved. However, even within that very important category, you have levels of reward or lack thereof. So if we were to stop right here, you could make a question, or you could think, well, then what's the big deal? Right? Does it really matter? I'm saved. I'm part of the good, solid foundation. So what if my work was not up to par? Isn't salvation what is ultimately important? Isn't salvation what we strive for? What, from an eternal perspective, what this is really all about? True. But that's only part of the truth, because on verse 16, he goes on to say, do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? Now the plot thickens. How does the plot thicken? Why is it that it's important for us to work diligently, work in the best way that we can as we are building up this blessed structure? Paul claims that it is not something that you use. It is not something that you live in. It is not something that you build and you leave it there. Paul is saying, you are it. And here, he uses the term, again, do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? In another place, I think chapter 6 of the same letter, 1 Corinthians, Paul will use this analogy once again as far as people being the temple of God, but he will utilize it in a different way. Here, the you is plural. Basically, and I think that the correct grammar term in English is y'all. Here it's y'all. You, all. It's corporate. Again, in another place, it's going to be you individually because he has another purpose to utilize this illustration for. But here, he is saying, you. Who are you? Anyone who is part of this building project that is laid upon, that is built upon this solid foundation. You all, collectively, are the temple. Now, isn't it silly for you to do a shoddy job, for you to do a less than perfect job, for you to cut corners on yourself in a house that you will live in, hopefully for all of eternity, the rest of your life? If you are building something for someone else, then you could make an argument. Yeah, I'm here, but who knows what's going to happen in 10 years, 5 years, or whatever. They can't even find me. They wouldn't even know where I am. You are the building. You are the temple. You are this structure. Not only are you part of the building project, but you are it. Is there any better incentive? That's you. Who in the world would build themselves up in a less than ideal way? It is crazy. If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. Paul here sounded like Yoda. Basically is, for you are the temple, right? And it's, here in the New King James Version, they try to be overly literal with how the wordings, the words were positioned. Didn't have to. Sounded kind of funny. But again, the premise is, this is not only God's temple, God's building, God's church. It is you. You are it. Why would you do anything less than ideal, than a great job, than diligent work? Why? It makes no sense. So here we're not just talking about salvation. That has nothing to do with you. That has everything to do with God. But how that building is built up, that has something to do with you. And why would you know that part of it, the important part, has nothing to do with you. Jesus died for you on the cross. You did not deserve it. You receive it by grace. But the small part, or smaller part, that it does have something to do with you, it's not even like you're doing it for someone else. You are doing it for yourself. What a great deal. Don't you think that is a great deal? Part of it, which you fully benefit from, you had nothing to do with it. He did it all. The other part, who is to a lesser degree less important, there's a better way for me to say this, but whatever. The other part that you can do something for, it's not even like you're doing it for God. You are doing it for yourselves. You are part of the building. You benefit from that on a daily basis. What a great deal. It's like a win-win. There is no losing here. Why would you do anything less than the best work possible? And here we have it. This illustration from Paul. Now, if you are looking for a New Year's resolution, right? If you have not found one, this is a great one to have. It's a great one. Because again, going back and forth and thinking about the truths contained in this analogy, in this illustration. No illustration is perfect, right? So we have to be careful. There are parameters. Can't go beyond. And here, I may even go beyond the scope of what Paul originally intended. Hopefully not too far. But as we continue to build up the church of Christ, the temple of God, that which he is part of, that which he is the focal point of, this is true for me, and it may be true for you as well. The more you live in a place, or such as this particular structure, right, that we call church, the more you come to a place, the less you notice the things that need to be done to it. Isn't that right? You get like nose blind, but not nose, your eyes or whatever. Because you just kind of used to it. At first, you're like, oh, that crack, that wall is kind of, painted a different shade of whatever that is, beige, than the other beige color. That stain in the carpet, that leak on the roof, that whatever. At first, you notice. And you're even like appalled. Man, this is a church. What are these people doing? But then you come, and then you come some more, and then you come some more. It may be, again, that happens in our own homes as well. You live there. At first, when you bought it, you have this to-do list, and again, you're going to make this great. And you do a couple of the honeydews, and you do a couple of things, and then you live there. And then months pass, years pass, decades pass, and you just kind of get used to it. And no longer are those things alarming. No longer are those things shocking. And you just kind of learn to live with it. And I think the church of God, oftentimes we treat it in a similar fashion where in the beginning, whether we're talking about if we're part of a new community or if we're talking about when we are brand new believers, we have that desire to just work and do everything right and do everything to the best of our abilities and just gung-ho for God. And then after a while, we're like, blends into the wall. Just turn off the light. Just cover it with, a picture. Who even looks at the floor? And we have a bunch of delayed and deferred maintenance. And we just kind of, somebody will get to it eventually. Right? Somebody will do it. From a spiritual perspective, we do this quite often. And we just learn to live with these glaring imperfections. Mickey Mouse jobs, duct tape work. The fire will come. The fire will surely come. And that which you have learned, that which I have learned to live with, will be exposed for what it is. Wood, hay, straw. May we endeavor. May we strive not to settle as we continue to build up the church of God, whether we're talking about this particular community and beyond, doing the best job that we can. We are benefited for that. First and foremost, God should be our focal point. But we ourselves are benefited by that. Why not do the best work that we can? New Year's resolution. Amen.